Welcome, everyone, to the Firing the Man podcast. On today's episode, we interview Casey Armstrong, who is the Chief Marketing Officer at ShipBob. Now, Ken, we are on the quest to find a 3PL service for both of our businesses. And I have to say, we may have a new leader. One thing Casey talks about in this interview is Q4 fees. And I'm not going to give it away now, but one thing that drives me nuts about Amazon is their storage fees go up by a factor of 4 in Q4, and that is not the case with ShipBob. What stood out to you during the interview?
Yeah, it was a great interview, and you're right. I was really impressed with ShipBob. Casey represented well. A couple things that stood out to me was the rapid expansion. And they're adding fulfillment centers at a record pace. Casey mentioned they're adding up to 100 people a month. They're hiring for fulfillment centers to keep up with the demand. They're going international, or they are international. They're expanding, and the returns. I was really impressed with the return process. The way Casey describes it and how it works. You'll have to listen, but it was really impressive.
If you are looking for a third-party logistics company for your e-commerce business, this is an episode you are not going to want to miss. Casey, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. So first things first, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Casey Armstrong, as you mentioned. I'm the CMO over here at ShipBob. And to add a little bit of what you covered, we really view ourselves, I'd say, in a more simple way, like providing that Amazon level fulfillment experience for direct-to-consumer brands. So if you want to own your customer data, own your branding, have a direct line to your 3PL while still taking advantage of the technology both within the warehouses and in the merchant-facing application, to the distributed fulfillment center network that we have. So we have 8 facilities today in the US. We have 1 in Europe. We have 1 in Canada. We're opening 2 more in the US actually in October, which is shockingly tomorrow, I think. Before joining ShipBob, I was over at BigCommerce. And then before that, I was at a company called Watchmaster, where we were a direct-to-consumer luxury watch brand over in Europe and then expanded over into the US.
Very nice, very nice. Looks like you've got a pretty broad background in e-commerce. So looking forward to the rest of this interview. So Casey, can you tell us a little bit about ShipBob's story, their mission, location, history, how they were founded?
Yeah, so the company was founded by Drew Saxena and Dave Galati out in Chicago. And they actually had another startup that involved sending more snail mail picks. And they noticed that they were going to the post office all the time. And they noticed they were waiting in long lines all the time. And they noticed they were seeing the same people in line all the time. Like, something is wrong here because we hate going to the post office. And so that was really the catalyst for them to start ShipBob, which is, hey, they would actually go to some of these, the post office or UPS. And that's actually how they would win a lot of the initial customers, which is, whatever, hey, John or Jane, we see you here all the time. What if we came and picked up your goods for you and shipped it on your behalf? And so they actually would go around and pick up items from people's houses or their places of work, take it back to their quote unquote fulfillment center, which was Drew's apartment for a while, and actually ship those out. And so that was like the genesis of ShipBob, which is pretty wild, where now, again, we've got a global footprint of fulfillment centers. Our locations are hundreds of thousands of square feet. We're working with thousands of brands and shipping millions of products every single month. It started by hustling in line at post offices.
Well, very nice. And I have to ask, is there any good story about the name ShipBob?
So let's see. That was a question that I had. When I joined, it was probably like the last question I asked, our CEO, Drew Saxena, when I was interviewing. And I'll give you at least the name that we share out there, and it's really taking Bob, and it stands for, an acronym for Bend Over Backwards. And that's, I'd say, really core to like the mission that we have as a company, which is it's customer first. And we just announced a very large fundraising event earlier this week. We were fortunate to close a $68 million round from SoftBank, who I'm sure a lot of the listeners are familiar with. They're behind companies like Uber and NVIDIA and a lot of the, Slack and a lot of the most influential companies out there. But anyways, the first question we often get is, well, where are you going to put all that money? And it's just really going back to how can we better support and bend over backwards for our customers. And so it's, expanding fulfillment centers, adding into the technology, hiring more engineers. And so, it's really a core tenet of the business.
Very nice. Very nice. Now let's dive into the logistics of how ShipBob works. So currently all of my orders are fulfilled through Amazon fulfillment, through FBA. And if I were to sign on with ShipBob, how would my orders be processed? Does it sync up with my Amazon Seller Central account, or would I need to manually enter orders? How does that work?
No, so we would connect with pretty much however you're selling. And so we integrate with all the major carriers and marketplaces. And so let's say your D2C site's run by like a Shopify or a BigCommerce or a Woo or a Wix, we would automatically pull in data from that, constantly, all day, every day. If you're also selling through Amazon and Walmart and eBay, the same thing. And so all of that would then pipe into ShipBob. We would actually store your goods across our fulfillment centers or, the fulfillment center of your choice. And then as those orders come in, of course, ship those out.
Sounds good. Now, when we're evaluating 3PLs, we're doing a cost benefit analysis. And so getting a good understanding of all the costs involved is important to us. Mm-hmm. So can you go over all of the costs involved for a particular product?
That's a great call out is trying to get like an apples to apples comparison between the, fulfillment partner that you're deciding between. And I think even before you get to that point is understanding like what you need in your partner, because for a lot of e-commerce brands, we're a great solution. For some e-commerce brands, we're not. And I think that's something that we really focus on as a business as well, is knowing internally like when we are not a good solution. So I'll give some examples on that. If you are doing 90% of your business B2B, and part of that B2B solution is you ship a lot of products to, the thousands of gas stations and boutique grocery stores around the US, like ShipBob is not going to be, the right solution for you. If you're shipping grand pianos, ShipBob is not going to be the right solution for you. If you are shipping primarily direct to consumer, regardless of which channels they're going through, and it doesn't have to be just within the US, we ship to all the countries around the world, ShipBob could be, a great solution for you. And so again, it's starting with like, what do you need in a partner, both on like their operational capabilities and also their footprint. So meaning their geographical footprint, where they can actually ship on your behalf as well, because that helps both with like cost savings and time. And then from there, it's understanding how do they charge you? And so we try to simplify it as much as possible. And there's just really three ways that we charge. One is on the receiving, which is all things considered pretty nominal. And we actually offer discounts for what we call, let's just call it good behavior, meaning if you submit your information to us properly, you will be billed less. And so that's actually something to focus on real quick, especially with Q4 coming up and a lot of fulfillment centers not taking on new clients, or they're being just completely slammed, or they have very limited inventory, or they have very limited storage, is the inbound shipments that you send to your fulfillment partners, understanding the information they need, and we're in either doing it yourself or working with your manufacturer, being as clear as possible on what these items are. Because if they're receiving a lot of goods, they need to be able to store it as quickly and efficiently as possible. So again, receiving. Number two would be on the storage side. And so we charge based off of pallets, bins, and shelf spaces, and that's monthly. And that's very, very transparent there. And then number two is what we call total fulfillment costs. And so this is, a bulk of the costs that a lot of brands will incur. And so here I think it's important of asking, scratching below the surface of understanding like what your costs are. Because sometimes when people are evaluating ShipBob versus somebody else, they'll say, well, you're charging me X and this 3PL is going to charge me Y. Why is theirs cheaper? But what they're really showing is this is what it's going to cost for the shipping label. What they're not including is, well, what is the pick? What is additional picks? What does it cost for the actual packaging? What does it cost maybe for different like kitting or other special requests? And once you add all that up, it can get expensive pretty quickly. And so for an example at ShipBob, because we know that our customers have on average, I think it's 3.3 units per order, we actually give up to 5 picks for free to our customers. And so that's baked into the cost as well. And then we also don't charge for packaging as well.
Okay. Now, for our listeners, if they're interested in getting a solid number around fulfillment, how would they set up an onboarding call with ShipBob, or what would be the process to get that ASIN level detail?
Yeah, so there's really 2 paths. And so one is we actually offer a full self-serve plan. You can go to ShipBob.com and sign up and do it all yourself. You can ask, the product will ask you a handful of questions to understand more about your business, and you'll be presented with some different pricing options, and then you can go from there. And we have hundreds of customers every single month that go through that self-service option. And then another option as well is you can work with the sales team and work with a fulfillment specialist, and they can go through, understand your business more, and help get you started that way as well.
Sounds good. Now, does ShipBob process returns?
We do process returns, and actually something to call it too on like how you can get started. So a question we get often is like, well, how fast can I get started? And honestly, the answer is it's more dependent on you, the merchant, than us. We've had customers that do 30,000 plus shipments get started in less than 2 weeks. And why? It's because they actually realized that they didn't want to do their own fulfillment logistics any longer. They were based in Denver, which is very close to some of our fulfillment centers. And so they were going through like the tech onboarding process at the same time where they were moving all of their goods to 2 of our fulfillment centers. And so they got up and going really fast. If you are manufacturing overseas and there's a delay in getting things over here, of course, that's going to cause some delay in getting started. And so again, it often depends on the merchant and how quickly they want to move and can move. On the returns front, yes, we do process returns as well. And so we have returns technology in our merchant-facing application as well. And then we also work with a lot of the major returns platforms out there like Returnly and Loop Returns and Happy Returns as well.
Very nice. And we'll link to all of those in the show notes. And just a little bit of backstory on this question. I currently am processing all of my own returns and am on a first name basis with the UPS guy. He shows up to my house every single day. And that is something I would really like to get off of my plate. And so that is, I was relieved to hear that answer because that's not a service that all 3PLs are offering right now.
The local UPS person is like the modern day like milkman. So there you go. Exactly.
Yeah, first name basis for sure. So Casey, this question is kind of a 2-part question. So can you tell us where your fulfillment centers are located? And do you offer, I know you said the software kind of integrates with multiple sales channels. Do you offer like a 2-day badging for say Walmart or other sales channels, Shopify?
Perfect. So I'll answer both of those and actually throw in like another item as well. So our fulfillment centers, like I mentioned, we have 8 in the US, we've got 2 internationally. Next year, we plan on opening 8 to 10 more fulfillment centers domestically and abroad as well. So we'll probably double our fulfillment center count by the end of, from where we are today, by the end of 2021. And so we have locations in, let's see if I can rattle all these off. So California, we have 2 in Texas, we have 2 in Illinois, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Florida. So those are the 8 within the US. Again, we're opening 2 more in October, another in Texas and another in the Northeast. And then we have 1 in Ireland and we have 1 over in Canada. Something I will call out as well, which is something that we think is extremely important as a company and for our merchants, and what's allowed us to, what we believe, run a better operation and provide that value to our merchants is, so not only with us do you get the ShipBob technology, but it's ShipBob technology that powers all the fulfillment centers. And why is that important? Well, as you distribute your inventory across multiple fulfillment centers, regardless of the location, you're getting the same experience, and we're doing the same things the same way across all fulfillment centers. And so what often powers the fulfillment centers is what's called a warehouse management system. And so some companies, especially with a distributed footprint, they'll often tap into a bunch of different 3PLs that use disparate WMSs, or those warehouse management systems. So that means that they're running their operations differently across all locations. And for us, it's just paramount. It's like we would not do it any other way. The same technology has to power all of the fulfillment centers. And so the way that we receive inventory, the way that we stow inventory, the way that we pick and pack inventory, the way that we ship it out, the way that we track metrics across the entire supply chain and life cycle of these orders is the exact same across all locations. And why is that also important? Well, that allows us to make changes within the product of these benefits that we can then pass on to our customers. An example here is how we have things like our picking algorithms, or our batch picking algorithms, or the location of the goods. We've been able to drive massive efficiency gains by continuously tweaking these algorithms, of which we're pushing changes to production every single week. And that way we can accelerate not only our accuracy of picking and packing products, but also how quickly we can get them out, which then can allow us then to get them to the carriers much faster. On the badging question, that is some stuff that is going to be coming in 2021. And so with Amazon and Walmart, I'll just say that there are complexities there that will likely change in 2021 at a more broader level. And so I'll kind of stay away from that. In regards to badging on, Shopify and BigCommerce, some of the other major platforms, and then also some up and coming marketplaces, that is definitely coming in 2021.
Okay, so to circle back a little bit and digest that one. So badging is coming in 2021.
It's coming in 2021. And sorry to interrupt, actually something to call it there. We do have what we call 2-day express programs. And so that way we will we will work with you. So we always, before you start working with us, we'll give you suggestions on with how we think you should distribute your inventory. At the end of the day, that's up to you. Some people say, I just want one fulfillment center in the middle of the US and let's roll. Or they're like, hey, I'm based in LA. I want a fulfillment center that's close enough for me to drive to, even though with COVID, we don't let people come in the fulfillment centers, but that's their prerogative. And some people say, hey, you guys are the experts. We want to listen to you. And we say, okay, great. We think you should distribute across these 3 different fulfillment centers. So they can pick and choose. And then from there, we have our 2-day express program, which that way, you can pass that on. And while that's not a quote unquote badge, that can be part of the product listing page and the checkout experience on the checkout page that you can bubble up and highlight, which is you are offering this 2-day express experience. And we see customers using that in their ads. We see customers using that in like a persistent nav at the top, whether they're offering free 2-day across the board or free 2-day if they spend over a certain amount. We see that all the time.
Okay, excellent. So this is kind of an add-on to that. Now, you mentioned distributed inventory. So let's say I have a container coming in from China. Do I ship it to one fulfillment center, and then does the software distribute it out to the rest of the fulfillment centers? Can I pick and choose? You guys have a recommendation, and does that cost more to do that?
Currently, we recommend that customers have it split before it gets to our fulfillment centers. And so let's say you're shipping something to one of our Pennsylvania facilities and our California facility, you just have them ship it separately. We also do that because sometimes customers want specific SKUs only located in different locations. Like for an example, there was an apparel company, actually like a baby apparel company, and they had these like shark plushies. Those sold great on the coast. They sold essentially zero in Middle America, and so they wanted items like that only located in certain fulfillment centers.
Gotcha. Yeah, if I had surfboards or something, I wouldn't ship them to the Midwest, right?
Well, Austin likes to claim that they're the stand-up paddleboard capital of the world. And as a SoCal resident that also lived in Austin for a while, I would just smile and nod. But people can claim whatever they'd like.
So Casey, how long does it take you guys to ship a product once an order is placed?
Yeah, so this is another thing that I think is important to understand your needs as a business and the service level agreement that you would sign up with, or the SLA with your fulfillment partner. And so at ShipBob, what we have is a noon local time cutoff that things will be shipped out that day. And that is something that we keep an extremely close eye on and hold all of our fulfillment centers very close to. I know with COVID, we actually had to, for a short period of time, extend that out for an additional day and then bring that back in so that it was coming out same day. But that's important to understand because uh, that's so like let's take Amazon, for example, which no question is the gold standard for logistics across the world, on last mile in e-commerce. They, a lot of people, myself included, experienced very long delivery times, especially in March, April, May, June. Even recently, I've seen some pretty interesting timeframes for delivery. And it wasn't necessarily the carrier that was causing the delay, but it was the fulfillment centers. And so they were taking days or weeks to pick products that they maybe deemed essential or non-essential, and then had to get those to the carriers. And so that's something that's very important to understand, is how long will it take your fulfillment center to pick and get the item to the carrier? And then the second part of that equation is the carrier and their speeds. And so that will depend on, the carrier and the carrier service that you're using. We publish a lot of this data pretty openly at carriers.shipbob.com if you want to check that out, where we've seen a pretty big spike once COVID hit across the carriers, really across the board. About a month ago, we saw a lot of them getting back to or below their pre-COVID levels. And then recently we started to see that spike up a little bit. And I think that's because a lot of brands are starting their Black Friday, Cyber Monday sales or holiday sales early, especially for the non-procrastinators. Unlike myself, I'll probably still wait too long and we'll see what happens. But carriers are starting to see another influx in demand. And there's just like a data point there. We know from at least one of the carriers, they were seeing 1 million more shipments per day in the middle of summer, on top of what they saw during the holiday season last year. The holiday season, what we've seen, often drives like 35 to 45% of all e-commerce volume throughout the entire year. And that's just like within really like a 2-month time frame. And so for these, and that's something that all these carriers plan for well in advance. But to see this come out of nowhere and to see, above Black Friday, Cyber Monday type, shipping demand in the middle of summer has across the world has just been a fascinating thing to have a front row seat to and watch.
Absolutely. This global pandemic has really changed the landscape of business, and it'll be interesting to see how much of this persists. Obviously, with Ken and I being involved in e-commerce, we are playing the long game here, and really think that a lot of people that start buying online are going to continue to buy online once things open up. But that's speculative at this point. So
yeah, I think it's just been a couple things. One is, I think it's interesting to study a lot of how like China changed when SARS hit, like in the early 2000s, and how just their e-commerce penetration just skyrocketed. And they had a much lower e-commerce penetration rate compared to the US in the early 2000s. And then pre-COVID, they were in the 30% range and we were in like the mid-teens. And now we're, let's just say, in like the mid-20s or above, depending on which data source you look at. And so I think that there's just so much room for e-commerce growth, even from what we're seeing today in the US. And a lot of that is not just, let's say, ordering clothes online, but it's groceries and stuff as well. And I think it will be fascinating too, especially if some of the larger players in the e-commerce space start sharing some of this data, is how many first-time buyers of e-commerce are out there. And so it's just these habits forming. And I'm sure you all are seeing this, across some of the brands that you work with, which is it's people ordering online and being comfortable with that for the first time. And that might sound crazy to the listeners and that might sound crazy to us, but there are a lot of people buying online for the first time. And then also when you say playing the long game, think of like the youth and younger people that are just buying things only online. And that's just what they're going to assume is standard practice forever. And so as more people get lumped into that versus the people that just buy sporadically online, it's the next 10, 20 years could be rather fruitful for those, playing the long game on e-commerce.
I second everything that you just said. I'm glad we're in agreement here. So moving on to the next question, I'm going to give you the question and then a little bit of background. So the question is, how will the order be packed? And what I'm looking for here is most fulfillment houses, they'll allow you to use branded packaging, but some won't. Some fulfillment centers may allow you to include marketing inserts, and some won't. Some fulfillment houses will put on the Amazon barcode for you, some won't. So can you go through that and address those points?
Yeah. So we have our standard packaging, which I mentioned we include for free. If you want to have your own custom packaging, you can do that as well. That's not black and white. There are nuances within there, and I think that's important for brands to think through. And so if it's just like a standard box, maybe what we will consider that is it's just another pick. And again, you get up to 5 picks for free. Again, it depends on the fulfillment provider you're working with. But it's, okay, here's the box, and we pick it, and then we pack it, and it's good to go. If you have, and we've seen this, especially with like, it's a newer sellers, if you have some like crazy intricate box that requires like 27 folds, and then you're putting the product in there, and then you want some like crinkle paper like sprinkled on top with like some perfume spray, like, we're not going to do that. We do kitting projects. We do custom work. But there's a line that, that gets drawn. And we do work with customers on thinking through that, because oftentimes they don't realize the additional costs that they'll incur no matter who they work with, or the time that they'll incur if they do it themselves. Also, it's something important to think through is like the way that we price shipping. It's what's called dimensional weight and then the shipping zone. So shipping zones is essentially how far you're shipping it. Dimensional weight's important because that involves the size and also the weight of the goods. And so you need to think through that with your packaging. And so if you're using some, extremely thick cardboard custom packaging that adds, another, half a pound or a couple ounces, and it pushes you over to the next like pricing threshold of your goods, that could be, cents or dollars for every single order that is eating into your margin. And so that's just something to think through as well. And then from your ask on like custom inserts, the world is your oyster. Include whatever you want. So, it's your business. We're here to support it. I know some people don't allow custom inserts or marketing material, but you can include whatever you'd like.
Now, with Q4 coming up, has ShipBob, do you guys have a game plan like on increased volumes and how to deal with that in the fulfillment centers?
Yeah, so we've been hiring nonstop since pretty much April. We start our hiring for peak season always rather early. It started a lot earlier this year. So, we've been trying to hire 100 plus associates across our network every single month. And so we're definitely staffing up on that and just, keeping very close line of communication with all the major carriers and continuing to open up local carriers in different markets as well, to try to offload as much that we can at times or when need be from major carriers. And why that's important as well is sometimes there's cost savings and performance level improvements by using some of the local carriers. So that's something we're thinking through. And then also as we're seeing just such an influx in inventory coming into our fulfillment centers, that's why we're opening up additional locations, because I know, certain 3PLs are setting pretty hard limits on the inventory that you can actually ship in there. And so that's something that's very important for, if you're not talking to your fulfillment partner today, then I would pick up the phone like right now and just understand if they're going to be setting inventory level limits, because we've heard some pretty crazy stories of people shipping vast quantities and then getting turned away when it's like literally at the 3PL's docking doors. which is not the most enjoyable experience. And so I'm sure you guys have some examples that you've heard as well, but it's just important to understand that and what your 3PL can take.
Very nice. Now, I would like to circle back on the returns. And one thing I've learned from processing my own returns is that not all returns are created equal. You've got one camp of people that they receive it, it's not what they want, they send it right back. The packaging is intact, and that is easy to put a new barcode on it and send it back into the fulfillment centers. There are also people that will use your product for 30 days, 60 days, and then decide that they don't need it anymore, and then utilize the free returns on Amazon, and then they'll send it back. And when I'm processing my returns, it requires a degree of judgment. Is this something that can go back into my new inventory? And so how would that be handled at ShipBob?
That's honestly more on like a case-by-case basis. That, we have our general terms, which can be found online on how we handle the returns. If you're, especially for the larger merchants, or if you have like more complex needs, you would work with your account manager on identifying those. Because if it's, I don't know, let's just say like here, like what I'm holding, which people can't see, like a black iPhone case, and I pull it out and I look at it and I don't really like it and I ship it back, like that's an easy thing to do a quick spot check. If it's clothing and it's like noticeably worn, or if the e-commerce seller wants things like ironed or dry cleaned and hung back up, that's their right and prerogative, because some people want that. We don't do that. But we will spot check the returns depending on what we work through with the merchant. But yeah, again, it's returns as a whole. You could talk for hours on returns and how to manage that best, and if you should even allow people to have returns, or if you should just let them keep the products and give them the money back. And so there's a lot of people in both camps. I'm sure you guys have your views and some lessons learned from managing that yourself as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is reasonable. It is not ironing and dry cleaning any used items. That makes sense. So moving on to the next question, shipping discounts. Does ShipBob partner with any carriers and offer shipping discounts? One, for inbound inventory from the manufacturer, and then two, from the fulfillment center to the end customer.
So we have freight partners that we refer customers to at times when they need help, or freight brokers, and they can help you with that. Where we get involved is really once things hit our fulfillment centers. And so again, we're happy to introduce you to the people that we think can provide you the best experience and hopefully save you as much money as possible. But that's not our core business. By working with a company like us and the volume that we see across all the major carriers, that allows us to get a much larger discount than an individual retailer would get through through the carriers. And then that is the cost savings that we pass on. And so we do provide discounts for merchants it's often volume based. So the more you ship, we can provide discounts there. Also, if you work with us on like the levels of complexity and how you're shipping things out, we actually have a lot of room for just pricing discounts that we can offer there. And so, for example, with this black iPhone, again, if you're shipping primarily a handful of iPhones cases every single month, and the white and the black and the red are shipping like crazy, there are ways that we can work with you to definitely pass some cost savings there. And then again, that's also working through the locations that we'd be shipping out to.
Cool. So Casey, now we've covered the shipping fees and quite a bit of the fulfillment fees. Now, what about Q4 fees? So I know for Amazon, they usually, I think it's like triple. It's a pretty big increase. What is ShipBob's pricing on Q4? Is it in terms of storage and fulfillment?
So we don't change our pricing depending on the season. And so I know that there are 3PLs that have an increased storage fee in Q4. I've also seen a lot of 3PLs rolling out what we'll call like a COVID surcharge, even on the shipping costs during Q4, which starts tomorrow for those of you listening later. We are not increasing costs on any of that this year. We do have a slight increase in shipping costs as the carriers increase, and so we're going to be eating part of that, so that all of our merchants don't have to take on the entire increase in surcharge. But we're not adding like an additional surcharge on top, which is what others might be doing. And so we just try to keep it, what the pricing you get on January 1 is the pricing you have on December 31st.
That is huge. One thing as we enter Q4 that drives me nuts about Amazon is their storage fees go up by a factor of 4, and it is just refreshing to hear a constant price throughout the year.
Yeah, I mean that's when sellers need you the most. Like their businesses really make for the most part, except for seasonal businesses, it's make or break during the fourth quarter. And so that, of course, supply demand, we're not going to get into like an economics conversation here, but like that's why Amazon can increase their rates, as do others, but that's when they need you the most. And so it goes back to that bend over backwards thing. It's, let's just keep flat rate through the year.
Very nice. Very nice. Now, at the beginning of the call, you had mentioned that you do have some international warehouses. Where are those, and what is the game plan for rolling out more international fulfillment centers?
So we have a location in the east coast of Canada, and we have a location in Ireland. And so what we continue to look at all the time is where is the end consumer or the end customer for our merchants. And then once that demand hits a certain level, or well before that demand hits a certain level, how can we start making sure that we have a fulfillment center in that location? And so some of the other areas that we're actively looking at is, Europe and Central Europe. We're looking at different areas through APAC, various locations within Asia, also the east coast of Australia. We're looking at potentially west coast of Canada. So we'll definitely be active and looking at how we expand from there. But as does everything that we do, it really comes down to just customer data and their customers' data.
So Casey, at the end of every interview, we like to do a lightning round. Ask a few questions. They're really hard. Are you ready?
I think so.
What is your favorite book?
I like to read when I can, a lot of fiction, even though kids and COVID have been eating into that. I'd say one of the most well-written books that I've ever read is Sometimes a Great Notion by Ken Kesey. So that's one of my favorite. I'd say The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield is one of my favorite books, just from I don't even know if I'd call it a business book, but essentially the premise of that is every day everybody wakes up with just doubt and fear, staring them in the face, and your job is to punch him or her right in the face and break through that and crush the resistance. And so I'd say I'll call those two books out.
Nice. Yeah, I love The War of Art. That's great. What are your hobbies, Casey?
So definitely chasing the kids around. I try to go to the beach as much as possible. And if not the beach, then the pool, but just, be outside, be in the water, and then, play basketball and volleyball as much as I can as well.
Nice. That's awesome. Okay. Last one. What do you think sets apart successful e-commerce entrepreneurs from those who give up, fail, or never get started?
Well, I think you answered it in the question, and that's just the persistence. You're not gonna get it right the first time. Nobody does. I mean, you heard the origin story of ShipBob, and now we're shipping out millions of items a month. It was two guys that were having struggles with their own e-commerce business, and were literally poaching people from post offices and then getting banned from those post offices because they were kind of stealing their business. And it's that belief in yourself and that persistence. So I'd say that.
Excellent. Excellent.
Well, thank you for being on the Firing the Man podcast. Where can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, come check us out, ShipBob.com. Happy to help. If we're not the right fit, happy to refer you elsewhere. Email me, carmstrong@ShipBob.com, or hanging out in the Twitter sphere @KCA.
Awesome. Sounds great. Thank you, Casey.